Alrighty, welcome back from lunch. How is everyone feeling? All good? Nice. So the next panel discussion will focus on looking back and reflecting on the past 14 years of the Hasso Plattner Design Thinking Research Program. The field has advanced because the affiliated researchers have been at the forefront of it all. The jointly funded researchers have worked together to discuss and evaluate research results and the impact they might have achieved. Today, there are 6 key figures from the field joining us to share their insights. First off, we would like to invite on stage Professor Dr. Christoph Meinel, the CEO and Institute Director of HPI. He is also the lead, he leads the HPI School of Design Thinking Research Program as the Program Director. He is also the founding Dean of the Digital Engineering Faculty at the University of Potsdam. Please help me welcome Professor Christoph Meinel. Also, we have a few professors dialing in remotely with us. We have as well Professor Bernie Roth. Let's see if, yes. Hello, Professor Bernie Roth. He's the Academic Director of the Stanford D-School, and he is the Rodney H. Adams Professor of Engineering at the Stanford University. Not only that, he has published widely in the areas of design, creativity, education, and robotics. He has won many awards for both his teaching and research. Some of them are, he won 7 Best Conference Paper Award, the Melville Medal, and the Outstanding Design Educator Award as well. So let's please help me to welcome Professor Bernie. Dialing in online as well, we have Professor Dr. Allan Reiss. He is the Professor of Psychiatry, Radiology, and Pediatrics of Stanford University. Professor Allan is a physician scientist at Stanford University, overseeing the Center of Interdisciplinary Brain Sciences Research. His research focuses on developing multi-dimensional models that improve our understanding of typical and atypical human development and cognitive behavioral function. Again, please help me welcome Professor Dr. Allan. Also, dialing in remotely, we have Professor Sheri Sheppard, Professor of Stanford University, and Professor Sheri teaches design-related classes and researches fracture mechanics and applied finite element analysis. In addition to publishing technical papers, reports, and textbooks, she has led several multi-institutional projects to build new educational research programs, such as the Center for the Advancement of Engineering Education and the National Center of Engineering Pathways to Innovation. Please, once again, help me to welcome Professor Sheri Sheppard. Coming back to researchers on site, we also have Dr. Julia von Thienen, a senior researcher at HPI. Back in 2008, Julia joined the Stanford Potsdam Design Thinking Research Program. Julia's studies concern design thinking as an approach to creativity, collaboration, and innovation. And then in 2018, a new line of research under the headline Neurodesign. And since then, Julia has built up the work group of Neurodesign at HPI. So with that, please help me welcome Dr. Julia. Next up, we have Professor Dr. Jan Auernhammer. He is an associate professor in transdisciplinary innovation at University of Technology, Sydney, and he also established the People Dynamics Lab. Please help me welcome Professor Dr. Jan. And we also have Professor Dr. James Landay, Professor of Computer Science from Stanford, a co-founder and associate director of Stanford Institute for Human-Centered AI, and research in human-computer interaction and design. Help me welcome Professor Dr. James Landry. And for the panel moderator discussion, we have our moderator today, Jill Grinager. She is a consultant for research and teaching at Hasso Plattner Institute, and she joined us joined HPI in 2020 and served as a coordinator for the joint HPI Stanford Design Thinking Research Program. All right, so give Jill a big round of applause.
Okay, so thank you, and what a distinguished panel we have today here in person and virtually. I did prepare a number of questions for the group, and I think it would make sense if, when I phrase the question, if everyone could take a turn and just briefly share a few thoughts and memories, and that way we'll get to have the most answers to all the questions. Because I think, as we know with design thinking, it's not just the visual impact that you have at the end, but how it affects people. And so we want to hear personal stories. So question 1, what expectations did you have in the early years? And as the field changed, how did researchers take these developments into account? Are the research results in 2022 significantly different than the research findings in 2008?
I'm afraid that I'm the only one that can answer this question due to my age and due to the fact that I'm all the years with the program. It's a pity that Larry Leifer cannot be with us. Larry and me, we discussed when Hasso supported the development of D-schools, the D-School in Stanford, the D-School in Potsdam, then Hasso is very much science-minded. He said, okay, the design thinking and the education of the young people, that is a methodology. There are some axioms like interdisciplinary is very helpful. Open spaces is very helpful. Iterated motivation. But is there a proof? Is it really true that interdisciplinary teams are more powerful, more effective than monothemistic one? Is it possible to measure whether open spaces have a good impact on the work of a team? So he said, okay, we need the D-School. He, also Hasso Plattner, very much trusts in it as a very important component also for the future education. But he said we should also have a look to the rationals behind. And so he came up with the offer to say, oh, if you both sides, Stanford, HPI, establish a research program that considered the various backgrounds and the various context of design thinking, then my foundation, will be willing to do something. And in a very short time, I think 2 months with Larry, we had fixed something which convinced as well Stanford University as well HPI, and went to the foundation. And the foundation in that time was even smaller than today, very much said, okay, we made the first step to establish the D-schools on both sides. Now we have to look also for the rationals. And for that reason, we cannot celebrate like the D-School Potsdam, the 15th, or the Stanford D-School, the 70th birthday. We have to celebrate the 14th birthday.
Okay, any other comments from our virtual guests?
These are all young guys. Oh, no, Bernie. Sorry, I cannot see you. Now I can see you. You are part of the program of the steering committee from the very beginning.
Yeah, I didn't want to contradict you, but I was around at the beginning. I would say
the beginning of
the beginning of time. I would say that there's a little confusion in that. Personally, I actually thought the D-School shouldn't do the usual type of research that we ended up in this program. I thought that the D-School at Stanford, at least, should be involved in the kinds of things we do in the course we do. We call extreme, which is entrepreneurial design for extreme affordability, namely real things in the real world, not just write papers, which I had been doing as a professor at Stanford, but we should change what we do from the usual idea of research. Larry, on the other hand, was very much engaged in CDR and trying to document what real researchers do rather than actually do stuff, but look at the philosophy and the theory behind all of that. But the thing that to understand is really, if you want to know what really happened, is that the D-School at Stanford never joined the program. It was CDR. It was Larry who joined the program, and it's Larry who brought it to Stanford. And in addition to Larry, we have a committee at Stanford, and Terry Winograd, who was a professor of computer science, joined me and Larry. So the three of us represented Stanford, but not the Stanford D-School, which was doing different things. So it's not a big point, but that's essentially it. And then when Terry retired, then James Landy was kind enough to join from computer science. So we actually had three people on the committee. Two of us were from mechanical engineering, Larry and me, and James was from computer science. And that sort of colored the types of research we did. But essentially, my version of what Hasso wanted was he wanted people to be able to prove that design thinking worked, essentially, which is what Christoph said, more or less.
By Bernie, I wasn't there at the start, but I've been there maybe the last 7 or 8 years. I've been at Stanford for only 8 years, even though I have a gray beard. One thing I think has changed is instead of only studying designers, often in idealized situations, which I would say is more of the style of the Center for Design Research, some of the research we've been funding in the last 8 years are people who build tools for designers or build interventions. And in our field, we actually have to deploy those and evaluate them with people really using them. So it's maybe getting a little closer to kind of the extreme affordability class that Bernie refers to in terms of getting out there beyond the laboratory. And that's something that's, I think, changed part of the research we've funded over the last few years with people like myself or Michael Bernstein or Sean Fulmer in mechanical engineering.
Then maybe I can add a perspective of the applied research, not from the program management perspective, and also a very German perspective. So as you mentioned, I started in 2008. That was when the research program began. And to be honest, I hadn't heard of design thinking before, so I didn't know what we were going to study. And yeah, as a scientist, of course, one is a bit cautious in the beginning. Does it work? And a concern that we had in the initial days was really, we had this practice called design thinking, but there were no literature references, no empirical data of whether the methods would work or under which circumstances. So in the beginning, we first wanted to find out whether that's actually the case. So we worked with a model of design thinking education that Uli brought to this place, pointing out creative people, creative places, creative processes as key cornerstones. And we did experiments on each of these pillars over the first 3 years. So first on people, then on processes, then on places, such as, for instance, the D-space versus classical classrooms. And generally, I think we found it very nicely confirmed, this impact, as everybody who practices design thinking probably would expect, but initially, you first have to see. With, of course, some minor details that were surprising, but yeah, still overall. And then
Julia, to tell some truths, before of the start of this program, we could not engage in HPI persons like Julia, because HPI was a digital engineering institute. We had only computer science, software engineers, and others to think about creativity, to think about other things. there was, we could speak about, but there was no basis for this. So this program opened in HPI as a possibility also to invite and engage people with completely other background. And in my eyes, for HPI, it was very important and very fruitful. And Julia was one of the first.
I think the third, next to Thienen Lindberg and Christina Noveski, yeah.
The third, she said, I do not know whether you can hear it in the US.
Yeah, and so that was the first phase. And then we wanted to find out more about what people understand by design thinking. So that was, for instance, the PhD by Thienen Lindberg, and then Holger Rino and Eva Köppen, Jan Schmidgen. They did studies on how people understand design thinking in companies or in different places with very diverse understandings. And I believe that was maybe one of the thoughts that led into the Global Design Thinking Alliance, that we really need to stay in touch and to communicate about what actually everybody is doing and what might be most important, or where we want to really work things out together. And then we still didn't have a theoretical basis, and we had a phase where many different labs and authors, and also David Kelly and of course all of us, we just borrowed existing theories to explain the phenomena that we saw in design thinking, such as many refer to Theorisa Amabile, or then there is Bandura with self-efficacy concepts, or the growth mindset, or we had the stages of change model. So we borrowed these theories to explain really what happens. And then, I mean, many of us became interested and attuned towards the history, but to me, really, a breakthrough occurred when a by now joint friend of ours, that's Dr. William Clancy, uncovered original materials from Stanford courses. And then, of course, so Bernie, for instance, I'm very grateful to you as well for talking about the history and your experiences, because what we had to learn at Germany, design thinking is not as novel as it seems in terms of the dates. So even the 2004 from Stanford, that's not when design thinking all of a sudden popped up, but in fact there has been, and you can take over immediately so that...
Shall I? I mean...
Yeah, but just maybe to close that sentence, so Bill Clancy uncovered materials from earlier courses from the 1950s, especially from a professor called John Arnold, who had come from the MIT to Stanford, and just many of the ideas that we find in design thinking have been in these course materials already. And that really means that we don't have to make up theories for design thinking, because it has its own theories. And I was so impressed finding that out. So he came to these theories by inviting just the brightest minds of that time, especially outstanding creativity scholars and outstanding designers and philosophers and so forth, inviting them to the courses. Everybody came together, shared their most recent and advanced understanding, and then he basically knitted together, and everybody else who joined that venture helped knitting and shaping what we call design thinking today. And it's really written out there. So written language sometimes helps to communicate complex thoughts. That was really great to see. And the theories, I think they are mostly cherished even today by other communities. So we have wonderful theories that have matured into practices since so many decades. And of course, with the help of some of the colleagues who are here online as well.
Wonderful. And so I'll ask my next question, which we've already heard some answers to, but I'll put it out so everyone can answer. How has the field changed over the years? Do you see any particular turning points? And as the Stanford HPDTRP researchers, Stanford HPI researchers, we really have been on the cutting edge. And so I'd be interested to hear what you consider personal turning points and the more academic turning points.
You know, I can start. It's again, what kind of time frame we are talking about? Are we talking about the last 14 years, or are we talking about the last century? Because, I have to again say thank you so much, Bernie, for allowing me to do this kind of research around the history of Stanford design. When we look at the turning point is a young John Arnold at MIT, really coming from psychology, bringing these psychological theories into engineering. Then of a young Bob McKim
who is an engineer and an industrial designer, bringing in a lot of psychological theories and practices into kind of like especially visual thinking and productive thinking and so on, into all these kind of practices. And a young Bernie Roth, of course, involved in that. You wrote this wonderful paper in the 70s on creativity and the design process. Or Jim Adams, who was a student of John Arnold, bringing these ideas of conceptual blocks forward and so on. Project-based learning is something that Arnold brought into the 50s. So if we were really talking about a turning point, then I would say the 1950s and 60s is really that turning point that actually created what we call today design thinking. And of course, over the years, it really has changed the name from productive thinking out of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s into creative engineering, into visual thinking, into ambidextrous thinking, and ultimately into design thinking. And very recently, actually 2 weeks before I've moved to Sydney, so about, what is it now, 9 weeks ago, Bernie and I went into Bernie's old office and we pulled out a lot of documents, and we found this wonderful document from Bob McKim out of the 1960s, where he actually uses the term design thinking very clearly, very explicitly around, and argues that too much of design thinking is too concrete, and it needs to be more abstract and imaginative, and in particular he emphasizes the need for visual languages. So if we talk about this turning point really, then we talk about the 1950s and 60s that actually created these ideas. And then over long periods of time, we are now here today and talking about these ideas that really, I think the wonderful thing is, these ideas were a lot of times not really public in education, and now throughout the world, we're actually talking about much more creative practices.
And maybe I can, before we have the next answer, maybe I can limit it a bit to the years of the Hasso, Plattner.
So I mean, you said what's
Stanford.
changed recently.
Yeah.
I think something that's changed recently at Stanford, for example, is the idea that a lot of design is about digital design. So Stanford D-School has just taken the undergraduate and master's product design programs under its umbrella out of the mechanical engineering department. And as part of their tracks is this idea that one of the tracks is really in digital design, which I think is something that has been going on for 30 years, but is really now central there. I think maybe it was more central here at HPI, given digital engineering being a big topic. But I think that's something that's different from the beginning of this program 14 years ago than now, that there's more emphasis in digital design work.
Eventually, Allan, you also, when you came in our program, you brought a new viewpoint, a new area. Eventually, you can explain it a little bit. Same question to you, Sheri, afterward.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I've been in this program and associated with the D-School, I guess it's 10 or 11 years now. And first of all, I want to say how grateful I am to Professors Meinel and Leifer for their support, unwavering support over this entire time. It's really been a career-altering experience for me as well. But I can recall 10, 11 years ago when I was approached by some members, particularly Grace Hawthorne of the D-School, and they said, hey, do you think as a neuroscientist and physician scientist, psychiatrist, that you can marry those areas, those fields to design thinking? And I remember myself thinking, okay, what is this thing, design thinking? I was quite naive to the concept and its history, but it was very intriguing. And the answer to that question was yes, we could. And over the last 10 years, I've had nothing but intriguing, interesting, fulfilling experiences using the tools that I'm familiar with and learning about design thinking tools and design thinking processes to, I think, generate this area along with others in the field that we now call neurodesign, and using advanced techniques such as functional MRI and functional near-infrared spectroscopy. And I'd say if there's anything surprising, it's been how cohesive and productive that work has been. And the other thing that's always very gratifying to me is that the work that we have been funded to do in this design research thinking program has really sponsored and accelerated the career trajectories of many younger folks as well at Stanford. And that's, of course, one of the best things that I think I can do in science.
Thank you. And Sheri?
Yeah. So I'm probably one of the other newcomers, and I'm really grateful for the program too. I mean, I've lived in the environment of the D-School for many, many years, but to be involved in the research has been terrific. And, you know, I've seen the evolution of you know, measuring this thing. What is this thing? And then what we measure it. And I'm glad that Bandura's name was mentioned, because I think that was a key thing on saying there is some sort of self-efficacy associated with this. And then what's the dosage? So Adam Royalty did a body of work looking at, you know, how do you progress through courses, and how does that relate to the students' development as a design thinker. So I think that matured the thinking. And then Adam's work and Helen Chen's and even mine are really asking questions of how does this ability move out into the world beyond the academy and affect organizations, and in terms of their innovation, in terms of their risk-taking and factors like that. So I think it's had legs too beyond the academy as an influencer.
And I mean, there's definitely been a professionalization of the field over the years. And so I think these examples, how design thinking is appearing outside of the academy, are very, very valuable. So the next question that I would ask, the design thinking research brings new perspectives, insights, and lasting value to researchers and to design thinking itself. The exchange between our institutions has had extremely valuable applications in both theory and practice. Design thinking has transformed. What do you envision for the future of design thinking? And looking perhaps cycles, maybe some things from the past are coming back.
You ask such sophisticated question. To say it a little bit simpler, in the program, in the very different disciplines which are involved, we showed that the main idea of this design thinking, that you can get new ideas, new approaches, innovation, if you do not follow traditional disciplinary boundaries. I think this was proved in a lot of projects. And imagine the program have showed that there are no rationals behind design thinking. This was not the case. So it makes sense, and it helped as well, D-School in Stanford as in Potsdam and all over the world, to say really there is something in this different things, and it can thought about in many different ways and connections. There are tools, there are functionalities that could be developed to support the design thinking approach. There are measurements that show that certain settings make people more creative than other settings. The big question, what is creativity? There are a few answers, a few small answers given by the project in the program. So I think because now this year it will finish this program, I think I just tell this to Hasso, it was a very good investment. And for us, for the researchers, and have a look here in the audience, there are many people that were involved in such research projects, and I think it was a good part of your life, wasn't it?
Julia?
That
No,
sorry.
Allan, please go ahead.
I can say for me, this will be brief, that we started off with an attempt to reveal brain activity, brain function underlying design thinking. And what that evolved into was an attempt, and which we're still working on, or to ask the question, how can we actually enhance design thinking by changing thinking, by changing interaction, by changing cooperation? And that to me is perhaps one of the most exciting things I've done in the last decade.
I think design thinking, if you look at much of the program here in this conference, is as well as what's going on at Stanford D-School, is really focused on going beyond products to design thinking for organizations and business and more strategic thinking. But I think you asked what's cycling back. I think at the same time it's cycling back towards product design. And I may be biased here, but I feel like AI is taking the world by storm. But AI right now does not have a human-centered design thinking approach. And in fact, AI needs that approach to design not just AI products at the user level, but also at the community level and the society level to make sure that AI products are having positive impact and not having harm. So that's something I'm really trying to push at Stanford and in my research, but I also think that's a place where design thinking should move and can have a very positive impact on what's happening in the software and rest of society.
Julia?
I think to your original question, I would have observed how in the beginning regarding the tool sets, we had an idea of them, or at least I personally conceived of them more as maybe a suitcase with lots of things, and you can exchange them, of course, but basically it's a lot of tools and you give them to others. And what stood out was also this experience, and I think that was partly the research of Mana Taheri, for instance, and also Hanadi Traife, and the experience with Cape Town University, which was very important, I believe, even if I haven't been there. This experience that design thinking needs to be something slightly different in different contexts, and we really have to keep it alive. It's not a dead suitcase, but it's something. It's more maybe like seeds that you plant, and everywhere it needs to grow slightly differently, and you want to rebreed it maybe for different purposes. So that's something that I believe we need to preserve for design thinking, that it really can be alive, and we don't have it fixed to anything particular, but really see what by our exchange of experiences and points of view we can do with these, such as in the area of ethical IT or ethical digital engineering, human-centered.
Sheri?
I'm reminded of a set of projects I was involved in back in the 1980s and 90s, and it was an attempt for the National Science Foundation to bring together universities to ask serious questions and do research on engineering education. And the field didn't exist then in terms of an area where you would dive in and do serious scholarship. And one of the outcomes, and there were like 70 schools, universities involved, one of the major outcomes of that was actually building the community of young scholars, of young researchers who would continue to ask hard questions, because I appreciate the comment, about this needs to continue to evolve. And now there are departments at universities on engineering education. So I think there's been more than a seed, a movement started here on saying this is an area of scholarship and an area of impact. So I think the people are a major part of moving forward.
Bernie, did you have any comment?
I just want to emphasize some things that Allan said and what others have said. One of the things that we did accomplish was we did support, we were biased towards young people and people starting to work their way up the academic ladder. And we tended to bias our support to those people, especially in the Stanford community, which wasn't as fixed as the HPI community in terms of who would apply. So we had a much greater uh, portfolio of people to choose from, and we would bias not only on the quality of the proposal, but on what it would do for a person's career. So that's something I'm really proud of. The other thing we did is generally the number was 150,000, and I always push to give people less money but include more people. So instead of 6 people, which was the nominal thing, we often included 9 or so, and I'm really glad we did that. And still another thing that happened, which again Allan touched upon, we people in fields that at first blush wouldn't have anything to do with design thinking availed themselves of the possible support and biased what they were doing into a design thinking framework. And that both enhanced what they did and how they saw their field and how we see design thinking. So we had people like Pam Hines, who was doing intercultural design. We had the young people in the HCI community doing things with crowdsourcing, and we went in all sorts of directions. Even in HPI, they did medical instruments, and these are things I wouldn't have foreseen that we would have gone into beforehand. So the things sort of exploded, both in terms of who participated and what fields were included. And it got down to what we believed at the beginning, but we never did, is that design thinking includes everything, basically, in the world. It's just a problem-solving approach and isn't bound to products or things like that.
I have to just reinforce that very briefly. You know, the phenomenon that we've come to call interbrain synchrony, which is when you have 2 or more people interacting and having their brains measured for how correlated their activity is. We started with very simple paradigms, largely as a result of this program. And I have to tell you that not only has that phenomenon of cooperation, interaction, collaboration being enhanced by interbrain synchrony been replicated across the world, but it's been amazingly expanded into all sorts of different areas I never would have thought of: marching in unison, speed dating, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been really satisfying and intriguing to observe over the years.
I was just going to second Bernie's comment in terms of the diversity of the research funded. I was really struck at our workshop yesterday with a presentation by a student working with Hazel Marcus and Jeannie Tsai. I mean, these are really world famous psychologists, and she was doing really incredible work on cross-cultural understanding of AI, which I think would not have been what we would have thought would be funded at the start of this. So that was really interesting to see how it could bring in people you would not think of as part of the design thinking community and do really relevant work.
Mm-hmm. And so now for a quick round, could everyone in 1 or 2 sentences please say what your fondest moment was in the HPI Stanford program?
Please allow me to have the last word.
Fondest moment. It could be part of the biannual meetings. It could be wonderful chats over Zoom.
Well, I'm just going to say I've had some really traumatic moments. I know Christoph and Bernie remember me having a bike accident on the way to the meeting where we decided on all the grants, you know, and I'm all bloody and like, let's go. But I'd say that the visits here have been incredible. I've mentioned just to Christoph that our visit to the museum here in Potsdam the other day, I felt was the best tour of a museum I've ever experienced in my life. So if you have time, go check it out before those pieces are gone. But it's just been incredible. I think for me, it's been more of my students. My students have really participated in the workshops and come back with new ideas or great commentary on their work that they hadn't got elsewhere. So that's been really changing to the research.
Jan? Oh,
Sure. I think there's two parts that I really enjoyed about this program, and I think this program has been absolutely amazing because of that funding that was possible for doing work that I think otherwise would have not been possible. And so for me, for example, working with Manish Sagar on these kind of neuroscience projects is just amazing that this was possible for me. The other part is kind of like these discoveries around kind of this history, this moments of where you're like, oh wow, there's something new, and here's something interesting. All these kind of moments that was kind of like, as a researcher, that is so important when you have this glimpse moment of discovery that was possible because of this program. That was kind of just amazing. And of course, then the community really of sharing all these ideas and sharing these glimpses of what we discovered was just absolutely amazing.
great. Professor Meinel?
So I was happy that we, from the beginning, we had in mind the idea to strengthen and to push interdisciplinary forward. It's not enough to let people work on their own topic. We need this, what we call community building. We need to bring the peoples together, eventually to speak and think about something third, not about only their programs, but the third. And this is, so the design thinking is a program for me in my long career brought and strengthens the idea of the understanding. The science can only win and bring new results and make new recognitions and if they start to learn to work interdisciplinary. So I look around and many scientific communities are organized in very tiny communities. They develop a special speech, and when you have the speech, then you are in, and if there is something wrong, you are out. So we cannot push forward recognition, understanding new ideas, new phenomena. And design thinking says very clearly, when you want to discuss with each other, to do this in the scientific languages is difficult. Because in scientific language, each notion has an own interpretation in the own community. So we have to come back to the level of humans, of reasonable humans, and to understand and to discuss as humans, and then later on we can go back into disciplinaries to make this scientifically more forward. And this program provided a long-term experiment in a certain sense, that this is fruitful. And we can ask the audience, there are many people that are involved in the program, that are supported in the program. In my eyes, this was the real gift of what we get from Hasso and his foundations.
Any other comments from our virtual attendees?
Yeah.
Sheri?
Yeah, I'll add a strong memory from one of the conferences that I attended, workshops in Potsdam, and I don't remember the illustrator, but she did an amazing job of cartooning or illustrating all of our events over a 2-day period. So it really just showed thinking out of the box of how do you document a convening. And then I really want to commend the group, even amid COVID, several years of in-person meetings not being possible, coming up with, again, design thinking creativity applied to how do you still make convenings meaningful. So just it marched on, and it continued on even with the difficulties of several years of the world.
Okay,
Yeah, I would also reiterate Christoph's comment about the best product of this program are the careers of the young folks who've gotten involved, and I've had the privilege of watching them do so well in their own careers now. I'd say for me, a personal disappointment is not being able to fulfill Larry's wish to observe or measure interbrain synchrony between an AI agent and robot and a human. I'm still thinking about that one, and I'm not sure it's possible, but I'm going to give it some continued thought.
Thank you. And we're running low on time, but Bernie, were you about to say something?
I'd say for me, one of the nice things was the working with people, like the committee of 6 of us. We'd come in and there'd be all sorts of vested interests, and somehow it all turned out quite well with good feelings between us. And I thought that was a great part of the way we worked, and also the pleasure of working with Jan and Adam Royalty and people like that. Niraj and different people throughout. It was a great pleasure for me.
Okay, wonderful. And I know, Professor Meinel, you wanted to give a short thank you.
I want to thank all of you. First, the one who cooperated in the steering committee. Of course, first, the foundation. Now, the people which were involved in the program, there was a steering committee, and we had very interesting meetings in the selection of the program proposals. We tried to make it efficient, so we asked for relatively short applications. You know, at least in Germany, with the state funding organizations, you have to write novels. I think it was 3 pages or something like that, to describe what should be done next year and to select this. Then I want to thank the organizers of the program, which helped. The committee meeting was easy, but the workshops in Stanford, the workshops in Potsdam, you remember here our museum. I remember when we visited NASA in Stanford. Thank you very much. Thank you, Jill. Then I want to thank all PIs, because without their commitment, without their idea to see a chance, or in this very open program, I can help young people for doing some scientific work. I want to thank all the people which are done the work in this project. Here are sitting a lot. I hope, particularly by the community building workshops, you made contacts over the ocean, which will longer stay than the program. I hope you could make advantage from someone I know, from someone I hope. You can advantage on your PhD program to get your personal development pushed. So thank you for all. I think this bringing the people together, this is the secret of getting success, sometimes unforecast success. And I think from the programs I know and I could lead and I could be joined, this was perhaps the most open one in all directions. And I'm thankful that such things exist, at least in Germany. I do not know exactly in the US, but I think it's similar a little bit with NSF, that they have their strict idea, and you have to go in this strict idea before you are allowed to get funded. Thank you very much. And I'm proud that we have led such a trace of 14 volumes of our Springer book series. So when the successor of Jan, after 50 years, investigate the development of such design research programs, they have it much easier than you, because they only have to look to the Springer series. Thank you for all.
So thank you so much to you, Professor Meinel. This is in the name of all the researchers, and what you've done over the years is really appreciated. You've pushed everything forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is really a surprise. If you are organizing things, typically one is responsible for thinking who should get the flowers. Thank you at the end for the flowers.
Okay, so I think we're out of time.
Does someone want to say something? No?
Sure. I just thank you to everyone. Thank you to everyone for being here. And we'll be moving on to the next panel, but these have been wonderful years. I've only been part of HPI for the last 2, but just seeing the deep connections, I know how valuable this program has been and what a difference it's made in the everyday lives of the participants, but also people who are exposed to the research, going to our websites. And so it's really amazing.
All right, let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you so much. Thank you, the panelists. Thank you, Jill. Right, so we will have a short transition break at the moment, and we will resume back here again at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much.